So how to get started with UX design in 2019? Hey pals, how is your day? My name is Nafisa and I'm a UX designer, a freelancer, and I'm here to help you to get better at your design skill. So today let's discuss what are the best and most effective ways and methods to start with learning UX design. All of these questions will get answered in this video. And for this, I've invited 3 guests that has more than 10 years of experience. So can you imagine that each of them has more than a decade of experience, and trust me, those people know what to suggest you in order to get started with UX design. Our first guest is Amr from Syria and he's living in Berlin, and by the way, he's working in Agent Smart as a UX researcher. Our second guest is Eugenia from Argentina and she's currently living in Barcelona, Spain, and also she has an awesome YouTube channel here and she also helps community to learn UX design in Spanish language. If you're curious, I'll leave a link down below. And finally, the third guest for today is Krisztina from Hungary, Budapest. She is also a UX designer, a freelancer. She's a mentor, she teaches in the courses on Udemy, and finally she holds a pretty awesome profile in Instagram and Medium calling a Sketching for UX. And all of us together have 3 questions to discuss today. And the first one is, so how did you get started with UX design, let's say 10 years ago, when there were not enough resources, not enough Medium blogs, not enough Instagram profiles, or even design courses? What were your most efficient and working methods to get started with UX?
So I'm not sure I'm going to be able to kind of give you what are the most efficient ways, the way that I was learning. I think like the way that I learned wasn't the most efficient thing. Okay. So when I started learning about UX, it was around 2010, I think, and it was still all kind of new and there was no like, it wasn't very defined. Not everyone like knew what the best way to learn it was. Yeah. So I was reading a ton of blogs at the time. And also I listened to a lot of podcasts and particularly podcasts about, you know, Apple stuff and like nerdy Apple products. And so the thing about like people who like Apple is that usually they care about user experience. And so in the way that they discuss things and they talk about it and how something should work, that was like a great resource for me to kind of learn how do you think about UX and how do you critique it. And that's when like it kind of switched in my head. And after it switched in my head, I started looking at everything that I was using and kind of saying like, oh, this is why I like this product. It's because it's working in this way and this way and this way. And for example, that's why I don't like, you know, Microsoft stuff and Windows stuff. It's because it doesn't have all of those things, you know? Yeah. And so for me, it was very much kind of finding out that there's this thing called UX and then being really interested by it, because I've always been interested in design and I was also kind of a nerdy person, but I wasn't good enough in design to like be a visual artist. And so that's like when I found out that there's this thing that's kind of in the middle between, you know, the programming and tech stuff and between the visual design, I got really excited and I loved it. And so I think like what the advice that I always kind of give to people is that you don't really need to go and do a ton of courses and anything like that. You just need to kind of flip that thing in your head and start looking at the products around you and kind of try and just sit down, look at an app that you really love and try to understand why you actually love it and what you like about it. And chances are you're going to find out like, oh, they do this thing really well, they do this thing really well. That's much simpler than other apps. And then kind of by reverse engineering,
I was about to say
that word.
Well, I started in Argentina studying multimedia design. I quickly found my way into UX design before there was really such a thing called UX design. And what I was doing in my career, I found this book called Usability from Jacob Nielsen that changed me a lot from thinking that design was creating just beautiful things to learning that design is actually a way to help others. So after that, I started to learn from more books, conferences, workshops, reading articles a lot while I was working. I was working as a web designer at that time. So, and there were not online courses, especially in Spanish. So I had to learn everything by reading blogs. So I think that my most effective method was always to be in touch with the design community. When I started, I remember that in my city, nobody was doing usability at that time. That was the hot topic, usability, and nobody was talking about it. So I used it to fly to Buenos Aires, to another city, just to join a meetup group about usability experts, just to learn more. Also applying my learnings on my projects and reading a lot.
I often get the question from my students or from my mentees that do I need any kind of degree or for my education to get into the world of UX design? And based on my experience, you don't need any kind of formal education. And in my country, in Hungary, we have a UX population survey in every 2 years, conducted by 2 Hungarian UX designers.
Wow, okay.
And one question in this survey is about your education and background. And I checked out the results yesterday, and interestingly, 26% of the participants came from a designer background, another 26 came from developer or programmer background, and the rest are from all kinds of different backgrounds.
Nice,
so,
nice. Yeah, you don't really have to be even like a designer or developer.
Yeah, exactly. And so back to my own path.
Yes.
I graduated as a lawyer in 2009, and in the same year I have started my PhD with these research fields like information society, e-commerce, and the usability of e-government websites. And as part of this research, I read the famous book of Steve Krug, Don't Make Me Think.
Yes.
And I read as many UX articles and books and academic papers as possible. And so, as I mentioned, I started with these e-government aspects because it was a nice excuse or cheat code for researching this stuff as a lawyer PhD candidate. And so next to books and articles, I also watched many online courses and participated in a 9 months long comprehensive web designer course.
Wow.
And I also had a 12-week long project-based UX course. Like we did a real life project with a real client.
Nice. So you kind of have like your own studies, you have your own bachelor or a master's degree you designed for yourself.
Yeah, I designed my own curriculum.
Nice.
Curricula.
Yeah.
Yes, you need to find a balance between the theoretical and the practical knowledge. So you should read a lot of books and articles, case studies, to learn about, you learn from others' mistakes, the key takeaways, and how UX methods are used in a real-life project. And I think that there are some foundational must-read books in this topic. For example, About Face by Ellen Cooper, or Designing for the Digital Age by Kim Goodwin, and some cognitive psychology, the 100 things every designers need to know about people, and so on. I think it's also important to work on projects, basically, right from the start if you can, and find mentors. For example, UX Mastery organizes a peer mentoring thing. Another thing is that you should participate in the local UX community. Go to meetup.com and just search for the nearest meetups. You should document your progress and process and write articles based on that, and really participate in the community with comments and follow people you really find professional.
So if you want to be a UXer, I'm sorry, you have to work a lot. Do a lot of things.
Now, being for so long in UX design, how do you keep it up? What are the channels that help you still to grow? How do you define where to grow? And do you even remind yourself some basics that you were learning, let's say, 10 years ago?
So for me, it's always very important to keep putting myself in situations that are not the same thing that I've been doing for a long time. So what defines someone who is senior, it's someone who's been doing like a job for 5 years, but not doing the same task for 5 years. So if you've been working for 5 years in something, but you're constantly kind of push yourself and go to stuff that you don't really, you're not really good at yet. If you've been doing that for 5 years, then you've obviously become like you've amassed a large amount of knowledge, and you become kind of senior level. And also one way that I find kind of every once in a while to keep seeing if my expectations of myself are the same of others, is that I just browse kind of job listings from big companies and see what do they expect from a senior designer. Like, oh, I have this, I have this, I have this. Oh, this is interesting. I don't have like that, you know, nailed down exactly. And one more thing that I do also is kind of I put milestones and keep track of what I was doing. So let's say there's one new skill that I really want to get good at. So copywriting is a huge thing. For example, to have good UX, you need to have clear text.
Yes.
So I put that as a goal, and I put multiple goals, you know, as the year goes along. And then when I do like a yearly review, I see it's like, okay, in the beginning of 2018, I didn't know like 1, 2, 3, 4. And now I can say that I actually know these 1, 2, 3, 4 really well. So it's like milestones, always stretching yourself, and looking at job postings are the stuff that kind of keep me always progressing and being able to, you know, kind of measure where I am.
Now it looks like I don't need to take a plane to join meetups because you can connect with a lot of people from Twitter, Facebook, Slack, YouTube, Instagram. There are a lot of channels. Actually, I created my YouTube channel especially for that, to keep up to date, to create a Spanish community of designers using the channel that I enjoy the most. So now there is not excuse to be up to date and learn new things. It's pretty easy. So I think that now the challenge, at least for me, is not how to organize all this information. And UX has grown in the way that there are a lot of disciplines involved in the field. So now, instead of trying to keep up to date, I'm trying to focus more. Focus on what do I want to learn the most, because there are a lot of things that you can learn on UX. So I'm trying to find a way to focus on how my career path is gonna be. And my top channels are YouTube, Medium, books. And time to time, I take online courses. I've taken courses from Udemy, LinkedIn, and Coursera.
Cool. So you're still keeping up with the courses, right? Cool.
Yeah.
Obviously, I read a lot, for example, on Medium. My favorite authors like Pablo Stanley, Eric Kennedy, Nir Eyal, Samuel Hulik,
agree.
and so on.
Yeah.
And as you know, I produce UX knowledge-based sketches each week.
Yes.
And these sketches summarize UX topics each week. And this practice helps me to refresh and synthesize my own UX knowledge. So this really helps me to organize my own knowledge.
Yes, that's pretty cool.
And so I think that content creation is a way to refresh your knowledge. And I always try out new methods. For example, one method I added to my toolbox last year is user story mapping. And there is a book with the same title by Jeff Patton, User Story Mapping, and I also have a plan, a dream for the future. I am planning to start a UX book club. So, and one more thing, that I always choose projects that are somehow challenging for me, and I always try to learn from the professionals I work with. For example, now I work with a great leader, and you know, it helps me to understand what leadership is and what are the traits or characteristics that are necessary to become a leader. Yeah.
It's really, like, from your words when you're talking, it sounds like there is no way you can be pro. You should always be the beginner. You always learn and learn, and there is it's never ending.
So I feel like with the rise of a freelance lifestyle right now on the market, it's so much harder to understand what is your actual level, especially in a UX design field. It's such a broad field where you can learn and be good at different type of things. So how do you even know what's your level? Are you a junior? Are you a middle? Are you a senior? How do you define yourself, and how do you understand how to grow from your level?
I mean, that's a really interesting question, because it can be very confusing if you're not specific about it. So I think the solution to that is being super specific. It used to be that when UX started, it was this new thing and everyone was kind of doing the same thing. But now it's become a huge kind of area that has multiple specialties within it. And so someone might be good at UX design, they now might be like, maybe they're not great at visual design or illustration. someone is good at UX research. So I think the way that you kind of you can be confident about saying, oh, I'm a pro at this, is not by saying I'm a pro at UX design, but kind of list the exact things that you are good at and that you can prove that you're good at. So let's take UX research. I can say I'm a senior UX researcher because I've done hundreds of user interviews and I've done a ton of usability testing, and I know how to talk to people. I know how to understand what they're saying and kind of turn those into a good design. So that you can very specifically measure. If you're talking about visual design, you can be talking about your illustrations and how they help someone understand and engage with the design and things like that. So I think it's kind of like, I don't believe someone should go and start like talking about the term UX designer in general, because right now that can mean 100 different things. The way that you kind of assess yourself is by saying, okay, this thing is actually made up of 5 things, and maybe you don't want to get great at all of them. Maybe you're only interested in like a couple of them. Maybe you're only interested in kind of animations or visual illustrations, anything like that. So I think you need to kind of try everything when you're starting out and then try to pick which are the stuff that you're kind of have a natural talent for or that you really want to get good at. And then you can start talking about these specific things. Maybe a company is kind of advertising, oh, we need a senior UX designer, and they don't have like really specific points about what they mean by that. If you're trying to get a job at this company, you can, like in the interview, you can start to interview them a little bit, and that also shows that you know what you're talking about. So you say like, by UX design, what do you mean? Do you mean mostly visual design? Do you want a prototyper? Do you want someone who does usability stuff? So what do you want? And then you kind of ask them and go through these things and understand which are like the most important 3 or 4 points that they're looking for. And then you can kind of compare and know like, okay, I do have like 3 of the top things that you're looking for. That other thing, I know how to do it. I'm not great at it, but I can learn it at the job. And so I think that I'm a good fit, for example. That's how I would do it.
Interesting.
Yeah, well, first of all, I don't think there is such a thing as junior, middle, or senior. I know that companies like to label designers like that because maybe they need to offer this kind of career path for their employees. But for me, it's just beginner and experienced designer. I consider myself an experienced designer that like to think time to time as a junior designer because it's important to have this kind of curious junior designer in you all the time. Yes. And when you are an experienced designer, companies expect that you understand, have a focus on strategy, long-term goals, and communication. You have to be a really good communicator. You have to understand the vision of the product. So yeah, for me, if you have worked with different customers, solving different problems, understanding different business models is what is gonna give you in the long term the experience.
Okay, so basically what you're saying right now is to try to do not focus on the visual skills, but if you want to be more of a pro, if you want to consider yourself like a pro, understand how the business works first of all, and then
of course.
You know, I heard a really nice way to decide this based on 3 dimensions. So it's not my idea, but I found it really helpful. And so the 3 dimensions are what the problem is, what the solution is, and what is your job in the situation. And in case of a beginner level designer, the problem and the solution is known, and your only task is execution. On mid-level, there is a known problem, but your job is to find appropriate solutions and execute. And in case of a senior level designer, both the problem and the solution is unknown and yet to be discovered. And your job is not only to discover the problem space, but also to make strategic decisions, validate that is the problem even exist, and if it exists, should we make a product or service that addresses this problem. So it's about identifying the right problems, finding the appropriate solutions, and then execute or help others execute. This is the senior level.
Okay, yes, right. And more strategic level.
Yeah, so this is a nice formula, and the other aspect is that, of course, if you work for a company in an in-house team, they will put a label on you, and you will have a job description, and you know, based on that, you can identify yourself as a beginner or a mid-level or senior designer, but you know, this is only an indication, and it works only in that certain organizational context.
Yeah, so what you're saying right now is that if you are a freelancer, you can't compare yourself to some closed circle of people. It's better to understand, are you able to just execute, or you're able to bring value to the business in a strategic way. And if you're working in a team, you know your label, but you shouldn't stick to it. Sometimes you just talk to other people, you understand maybe you're even higher and you deserve to be higher.